When Ellen found the receipt for a hotel in Cambridge crumpled inside the pocket of Tom's running jacket, she didn't immediately think of betrayal. Not exactly. Tom, her husband of 16 years, had always been meticulous, with receipts, schedules, affections. The lapse itself felt like a message. Ellen stared at it for a long time under the kitchen's cold halogen light, her hand trembling just slightly as she tried to summon reasons. Logical, mundane reasons. A client meeting. An event that had run too late. A mistake. But Tom had no clients in Cambridge, and the room was booked for 2 adults. In the close, heavy silence of the house, she slipped the receipt into her jeans pocket. She didn't ask him that night. She didn't ask the next morning. Instead, she waited and listened. And the waiting hollowed her out in strange, new ways. Tom, meanwhile, sat at his desk at the small tech startup where he was a co-founder, staring blankly at code he couldn't finish. He felt it, that shifting energy from Ellen, that near-imperceptible withdrawal, a new weight in her glances. Maybe, he thought, she knew. But then he told himself what he always did. She trusted him. Ellen was loyal to a fault, slow to anger. Still, when his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, he flinched. "Miss you." Sarah, the other woman. The mistake that hadn't ended after the first time. Or the second. Tom felt trapped. But he couldn't even say by what. By the thrill or the guilt. Or the way Sarah made him feel unrecognizably new again. Someone less exhausted by fatherhood and mortgage payments. When Ellen finally confronted him, it wasn't cinematic. No screaming, no dishes thrown against walls. It was quiet, measured. They sat across from each other at the dining table after the kids were asleep, a bottle of untouched red wine between them. "You're having an affair," Ellen said, her voice almost conversational. Her eyes, wide and dry, searched his face as if looking for something lost. Tom said nothing at first, and in that silence, Ellen saw the answer. Still, she waited for him to say it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The admission hit her harder than the evidence ever could. It was the collapse of all the shared years between them, the memories, the inside jokes, the exhausted, whispered parenting conversations at 3 a.m. "Who is she?" Ellen asked. Tom hesitated, then answered truthfully. "Sarah. She works in the office, next to mine. How long?" 8 months. The number stripped something out of Ellen's chest. 8 months. Through birthdays. Through their anniversary. Through parent-teacher conferences. The timeline had roots, thick and sprawling. In the days that followed, Ellen became someone she didn't recognize. She checked his phone while he showered. She Googled Sarah. She even drove past Sarah's apartment once, parking far down the street like some amateur detective, heart hammering painfully. Ellen also found herself confiding in Maya, her closest friend, who had her own complicated history with infidelity. Maya was blunt. You either get revenge or you get closure. Rarely both. Ellen didn't want revenge, not really, but she didn't know if she could find closure either. She confronted Sarah once by accident in the grocery store. Ellen was rounding the end cap of an aisle when she saw her. Tall, red-haired, attractive in a way that immediately made sense. Sarah blanched when she saw Ellen, and that cowardice, a shrinking back, averted eyes, infuriated Ellen more than anything. "You can have him," Ellen said, quietly but sharply, pretending to examine a row of canned beans. "He was never really yours to begin with." Sarah opened her mouth but said nothing. Meanwhile, Tom tried to end things with Sarah, who didn't take it gracefully. "You think you can just ghost me like I'm nothing?" Sarah hissed in his office lobby one morning. Tom realized with dawning horror that Sarah could destroy him if she wanted, email Ellen, show up at their house, start rumors at work. The betrayal wasn't contained. It kept leaking into his life, staining everything. Ellen and Tom began therapy. A man named Dr. Levine, with silver glasses and an unsettling way of sitting silently until you filled the space yourself, guided them through stilted, painful conversations. "Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy?" Ellen asked in one session. Tom looked at his hands. "I didn't know I was. Not until I just felt trapped, boring, old. Sarah made me feel alive." Ellen finished for him, the words sour in her mouth. Yes, the question loomed, week after week. Could they survive this? Should they? Their friends and families noticed the change. The way Ellen smiled too brightly at gatherings. The way Tom seemed smaller, almost penitent. Some friends, like Maya, pushed Ellen toward divorce. Others, like Ellen's older brother, encouraged her to think of the kids, as if children could, or should, cement a cracked foundation. By December, the first snow dusted their street. Ellen and Tom decorated the Christmas tree in brittle silence, their two kids oblivious. That night, after the house fell into darkness, Tom found Ellen sitting on the back porch, wrapped in a coat, staring at the cold stars. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked, voice breaking. Ellen looked up at him. Her face was hard to read. "I don't know what I want," she said finally. "Maybe just not this." Tom sat beside her. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Ellen whispered, "You have to earn your way back, Tom. Not expect it. And even then, it might not be enough." He nodded, feeling a fragile hope flicker and then waver. Ending. The next morning, Ellen opened her laptop. She had written 2 lists: reasons to stay, reasons to leave. Neither outweighed the other. She closed the laptop without deciding. In the yard below, Tom helped their youngest build a crooked snowman, his laughter reaching her through the glass. Ellen pressed her forehead to the window, eyes stinging, heart aching. She didn't know what the future held, but for now, for today, she stayed. It began with small things. At first, Ellen thought she was imagining it. A strange car idling outside their house late at night. Hang-up calls from unknown numbers. An envelope with no return address shoved into their mailbox. Empty inside. Tom dismissed it. "It's a coincidence," he said, trying to smile. "People get weird this time of year. The holidays stress everyone out." But Ellen saw the tightness in his jaw, the way he triple-locked the front door now. He knew something he wasn't saying. One night, after tucking the kids into bed, Ellen found Tom sitting in the garage, staring at his phone. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Tell me," she said. Tom hesitated too long. Then he exhaled sharply and handed her the phone. On it was a series of messages from an unknown number. "Does she know the whole story?" I could tell her. "You owe me, Tom. You promised." Ellen felt cold all over. "There's more," Tom said. His voice was rough. "Sarah wasn't just an affair. She's unstable. She threatened to tell HR at work, to tell you, to file harassment claims if I didn't—" He swallowed. "If I didn't pay her off." Ellen closed her eyes. "How much?" 5,000. So far. The betrayal widened, deepened, morphed into something uglier. It wasn't just infidelity. It was deceit layered with blackmail, cowardice, fear. The next week, Ellen started getting emails from a private, untraceable account. One was a photo. Tom and Sarah kissing in his car in the office parking lot. Another was a simple sentence: "You deserve to know everything." Maya, fierce and protective, urged Ellen to go to the police. "You have to protect yourself," Maya said. "This isn't just about your marriage anymore. It's about your safety." But Ellen hesitated. Going public would destroy Tom's career. And maybe, somewhere deep down, a part of her still hoped for a different ending. On Christmas Eve, Ellen came home from a last-minute grocery run and found the front door ajar. Her stomach dropped. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. She found Tom in the living room, standing in front of the fireplace holding a thick envelope. His hands shook. Ellen looked around wildly. The kids were still upstairs, untouched by whatever had happened. The envelope was addressed in blocky letters, "Merry Christmas." Inside, photos. Dozens of them. Photos of Tom and Sarah, candid and explicit, taken without their knowledge. Proof, evidence, and at the bottom, a note. "Leave him or I'll show everyone." Ellen felt something inside her harden. Enough. The decision, later that night. After the kids fell asleep, Ellen and Tom sat together at the kitchen table again, this time in a war room, not a marriage. "She's escalating," Ellen said. "It's not just us she wants to hurt. She wants to control you." Tom nodded, hollowed out. "We go to the police," Ellen said. Tom hesitated. "I'll lose everything." "You already did," she snapped, more bitterly than she intended. Then, softer, "We both did." Tom buried his face in his hands. Ellen watched him, feeling a complicated churn of rage, pity, loyalty, and betrayal inside her chest. What she decided next surprised even herself. "I'll handle it," Ellen said. Tom looked up, confused. You, Ellen said coolly, "are the liability." Final Act Ellen contacted a friend of Maya's, a criminal defense lawyer named Rachel Klein. Rachel was sharp-eyed, quick-tongued, and cautious. She advised documenting everything, filing a harassment report, gathering witnesses. "I can help you," Rachel said, "but you need to be prepared. If this gets messy, your private life will become very public." Ellen thought about the kids, about the shame, about the neighbors who already gossiped too easily. She thought about her own pride, and then she thought about the snowman out in the front yard, the one her youngest had named Bob, now sagging and broken. Something inside her steeled, bittersweet, ending on New Year's Eve. Ellen packed a small suitcase. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm taking the kids to my sister's for a few weeks. We need time. Real time. You need to fix what you can, if it's even fixable." Tom came home to the silence of it. No fireworks, no new beginnings, just consequences. Outside, the street filled with neighbors counting down to midnight, lights flickering in windows. Tom stood at the kitchen counter reading the note over and over. Upstairs, the kids' rooms were empty, except for the faint smells of their shampoo and crayons. Ellen drove through the dark, snow-laced streets, feeling the ache of uncertainty clawing at her. Would they survive this? Could trust ever be rebuilt from this wreckage? She didn't know, and maybe for the first time, she was okay with not knowing. She had taken back one thing Tom could never betray again, her choice. The snow was gone now, replaced by muddy lawns and brittle brown grass trying to come back to life. Ellen sat alone at a corner table of the Millstone Cafe, a book open in front of her, untouched. Outside, people hurried by in rain jackets, heads bowed against the drizzle. Inside, the coffee smelled burnt and the music was too loud. She wasn't reading. She was waiting. At exactly 10:05, the door chimed, and Rachel Klein, the lawyer, slid into the seat across from her. "You did it," Rachel said without preamble. Ellen allowed herself a small, humorless smile. Sarah had been arrested 2 weeks ago. Stalking, blackmail, harassment. Rachel had helped Ellen quietly build the case. Text messages, photos, the threatening letters, security footage from the grocery store parking lot where Sarah had once cornered her. It hadn't gone public, thanks to careful negotiations. Sarah had been offered a plea deal, no jail time if she moved states and agreed to a permanent restraining order. Tom's company quietly pushed him out. Not for the affair, not officially. They called it restructuring, but everyone knew. Tom now freelanced from a cramped rented office downtown. Their old life, family parties, school auctions, polite smiles at the neighbors, was over. At home, Ellen. And the kids had moved into a smaller house across town, 2 bedrooms, a sagging porch. The kind of place where you could hear the neighbors through the walls. But it was theirs. It was hers. Tom called sometimes. He sent long emails full of therapy language and apologies. Once he stood awkwardly in the driveway, holding a handmade birdhouse he and their youngest had built together. Ellen watched from behind the curtains, heart hurting at the way he waited 15 minutes before finally placing it on the steps and driving away. There was no final confrontation, no screaming matches, no dramatic court scenes, just a slow, weary disintegration. In the cafe, Rachel sipped her coffee and glanced at Ellen. "You okay?" she asked. Ellen considered. She still woke some nights gasping, clawing her way out of dreams where Sarah stood at the foot of her bed. She still sometimes missed Tom fiercely, the way he used to brush her hair off her forehead while she read in bed, but she didn't miss the lies. "I'm rebuilding," Ellen said finally. Rachel nodded. "Good. You deserve to." Final scene. Open. Ending that evening, after putting the kids to bed, Ellen sat on the porch of the little rental house, watching the rain slick the pavement into mirrors. Her phone buzzed once on the step beside her, a text from Tom. "Still here. If you ever want to talk." Ellen stared at it a long time. She didn't reply. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, she pulled a quilt tighter around her shoulders and closed her eyes, listening to the rain. For the first time in a long time, she felt something like peace flicker inside her, not closure, not revenge, not forgiveness, just space. And sometimes that was enough. The restraining order should have been the end of it, but some people don't recognize endings. It began again with small things, as before. An unfamiliar car with tinted windows parked across the street some nights. A wrong number call at 2 a.m., heavy breathing on the other end, the creeping feeling always of being watched. At first, Ellen doubted herself. Maybe she was just conditioned now, traumatized into seeing threats where there were none. But one morning, she found a new envelope slipped under her door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, the kids, playing in the front yard. Taken from a distance. On the back, a message scrawled in thick, angry Sharpie. "You ruined my life. I can ruin yours." Ellen's dilemma panic flared, but it wasn't blind panic anymore. Ellen had changed. She sat on the edge of her bed, breathing carefully, thinking like Rachel had taught her. Document everything. Stay calm. Move smart, not fast. Ellen called Rachel immediately. "Could it be Sarah?" she asked, voice trembling despite herself. Rachel's voice was grim. "It violates the plea deal if it is, but proving it could be messy. You need surveillance, evidence." "And in the meantime," Ellen asked, "you stay safe. Get a security system, keep records. And Ellen," Rachel's voice softened, "be ready. It might not be her." Ellen paused. "What do you mean?" "Someone else could be using Sarah as cover, or Sarah could have gotten someone else involved." The air in the room seemed to thin. The possibilities, Tom immediately came under suspicion in Ellen's mind. Not because she truly believed he would hurt her, but because betrayal had taught her not to trust reflexively anymore. He still had keys. He still wanted back in. And in darker moments, Ellen wondered, was his regret real? Or was it just about regaining control? An ultimatum. That night, Ellen met Tom at a diner halfway between their houses. She brought the Polaroid with her. Tom paled visibly when he saw it. "You think I did this?" he said, voice hoarse. "I don't know what to think anymore," Ellen said simply. She watched him flinch. "I know one thing," she continued. "If you want even the chance to be in the kids' lives, you help me find out who's behind this. Or you stay the hell away from us." Tom nodded slowly. "I'll help," he said. Ellen studied his face. Desperate, exhausted, older than she remembered. Maybe he meant it. Maybe not. Trust, once broken, never regrew clean. Plan set in motion. The next day, Rachel connected Ellen to a private investigator, Mark Benetti, ex-cop, eyes like slate, expensive but highly recommended. Mark wired the porch, installed hidden cameras facing the street. He taught Ellen basic counter-surveillance tricks. He taught her how to photograph license plates discreetly. "You're not crazy," he told her, tightening a hidden camera into the porch light. "You're smart. Most women ignore the early signs until it's too late." A new suspense. For weeks, nothing happened. Then, a camera caught a figure at 3:14 a.m. A woman, face obscured by a hoodie, dropping a package on the porch before sprinting back to the waiting car. The plates matched a rental car booked under a fake name. But when Mark dug deeper, the rental had been paid for, with a card that, 2 months ago, had belonged to Sarah. Except Sarah was supposed to be in New Mexico under supervision. Either she had come back, or she had friends. Bittersweet, suspenseful ending for this section. Late one night, Ellen sat by the window, a baseball bat across her lap, phone beside her. The kids slept upstairs. The new locks were bolted. The cameras blinked faint red lights outside. A storm raged against the windows. Thunder rolled like something ancient waking up. Ellen didn't know if Sarah was back. She didn't know if it was someone else. She didn't know if Tom was truly helping her, or if he had secrets left, dark ones that hadn't surfaced yet. All she knew was this. She wasn't the same woman who found the hotel receipt months ago. She wasn't waiting to be saved anymore. If they came for her family, they'd find a different Ellen waiting. The rain pounded harder. Somewhere outside, in the shadows beyond the porch, something moved. Fractures. Part 5. The edge of things later. That night, the motion sensor in the hallway chimed once, a sharp, quiet beep. Ellen froze, bat clutched in both hands, her breath a thin wire inside her throat. Mark's cameras would be recording. The system would time-stamp everything. If someone had broken in, there would be evidence. But right now, all she had was the primal certainty in her body that something was wrong. The front porch light flickered. Someone was here. The confrontation she didn't call the police immediately. Small-town cops weren't quick to help women like Ellen, women who left their respectable husbands, women whose domestic disputes made the neighborhood uncomfortable. Instead, she moved silently down the hall, stepping over the third floorboard, the one that creaked. Through the peephole, she saw a shadow shifting, blurred by rain. Then a voice, low, desperate. "Ellen, it's me." Tom mixed emotions. Against her better judgment, she opened the door but kept the bat in hand. Tom stood on the steps, soaked to the bone, his face a ruin of panic and guilt. He held up his hands. "I didn't know who else to go to." "You shouldn't. Be here," Ellen said. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her. Tom stepped closer. "You were right," he said. "It's not just Sarah." Ellen narrowed her eyes. "Explain." Tom wiped his face with a shaking hand. "There's someone else. Someone she pulled in to hurt me. To hurt you." "Who?" Tom hesitated too long. "Who, Tom?" He swallowed hard. "My brother." New revelation. Ellen reeled back. Tom's brother, Evan, had always been a shadowy presence in their lives, in and out of rehab, courtrooms, bad investments. The family didn't talk about Evan anymore. It was easier to pretend he didn't exist. But Ellen remembered now with sickening clarity. Evan had known about the affair. He had borrowed money from Tom. Money Tom had embezzled from a company account to pay Sarah off. It all clicked into place. The blackmail wasn't just Sarah's revenge. It was leverage. It was business. A way for Evan to squeeze more money from Tom. using Ellen and the kids as collateral. Moral crossroads. You lied to me, Ellen said. The bat lowered slightly, but the anger rose in her like a tide. I didn't know Evan was involved until today, Tom said desperately. Sarah must have brought him in after I cut her off. He's desperate. And dangerous. Tom nodded grimly. Very. The wind howled around them, rattling the porch furniture. Ellen thought fast. She could call the police, report everything, start a case that would drag out for months, maybe years, while Evan circled them like a vulture. Or she could end this her way. The way that scared even her a little. The dangerous choice. Get in, Ellen said, jerking her chin toward the house. Tom hesitated. You trust me? No, Ellen said bluntly, but I trust myself. Inside, she pulled out a pad of paper, shoved it toward him. Write down everything, she said. Sarah's threats, Evan's involvement, every lie, every transfer, every crime you committed. You confess. You implicate Evan. We use it as leverage. Tom stared at her. You want me to confess to a felony? You want to see your kids again? The muscles in Tom's jaw ticked. Then he picked up the pen. As he wrote, Ellen's mind raced ahead. She would take the confession to Rachel. Rachel would know how to use it, quietly, ruthlessly. It would be blackmail, yes. Illegal, yes. But it would be power. For once, Ellen would have the upper hand. Closing moments. Dark ambiguity hours later. After Tom left, Ellen sat by the kitchen window again, staring out into the dark. The bat was back by her chair. Her phone buzzed, a new text, no number. You can't protect them forever. No signature, no way to trace it. Ellen smiled grimly. Let them come. She wasn't the prey anymore. She was the storm waiting at the end of their road. Ellen stood on the cracked sidewalk in front of the old courthouse, a manila envelope tucked under her arm. Inside it, Tom's confession. Bank records, screenshots of the threatening texts, the photo of the kids, proof that Evan and Sarah weren't just playing games anymore. It should have made her feel powerful. Instead, she felt like she was walking out onto thin ice. Rachel met her at the steps, coffee in hand, looking sharper than usual in a dark trench coat. You sure you want to do this? Rachel asked quietly. No, Ellen said. But it's happening. Rachel gave a small, approving nod. The plan, they wouldn't go straight to the police. Not yet. Instead, Rachel had arranged a meeting. Not officially. Not recorded. A quiet conversation with Detective Marcus Shaw, one of the few honest cops still left in the county, someone who owed Rachel favors and hated Evan's family with a cold old grudge. The idea was simple. Give Shaw enough to lean on Evan and Sarah quietly. Apply pressure. Force them to back off without dragging Ellen or the kids into courtrooms or witness stands. It was risky. Illegal in spirit, if not by the letter. But Ellen was past caring about clean victories. Unexpected turn. The meeting was set for 11 a.m. At 10:45, Ellen's phone buzzed. A blocked number. Against Rachel's advice, Ellen answered, a voice she hadn't heard in months. Sarah, you think you've won? Sarah said, her voice half laughing, half breathless with rage. You think this little stunt scares us? I think you should be scared, Ellen said calmly. Sarah's voice turned deadly. You don't understand. This was never about Tom. It was about you. Ellen blinked. What are you talking about? You think you're innocent? You think you didn't build your life on other people's ruins? The call disconnected before Ellen could answer. Doubt creeps in the words stuck to her like burrs. Sarah had always been unstable, manipulative, delusional. But something about the way she said it, the bitterness, the certainty, lodged deep in Ellen's chest. Had she built her life cleanly? Had she turned a blind eye to Tom's ambition? Had. She ignored the ways he cut corners, lied, made excuses, because it made their life easier. The kids' private schools, the vacations, the house she had loved and lost. None of it had been clean. Maybe she hadn't lied. But she had let herself be lied to. Is silence complicity? The meeting detective Shaw was waiting in an unmarked car across from the diner where they'd agreed to meet. Rachel handled most of the talking. Ellen handed over the envelope wordlessly. Shaw flipped through it, his face giving nothing away. Finally, he closed the folder and looked at Ellen. "You want this to go away?" he said. "Yes." "You want your life back." Ellen thought about that. The truth was, she didn't even know what life back meant anymore. "I want them away from my kids," she said simply. Shaw nodded once. "I'll take care of it." There was a chill in his voice, something clinical and final. Ellen watched him walk away and felt no relief, only a deeper, colder uncertainty. Later. That night Tom came by after dinner. He didn't come inside. Ellen kept that boundary sharp. But he stood on the porch in the dark, shifting from foot to foot. "I heard," he said. She crossed her arms. "From who?" "Does it matter?" He sounded wrecked. "It's done, isn't it?" "Maybe," Ellen said. "Maybe not." They stood there in silence for a long time. Tom finally said, voice thick with emotion, "I'm sorry for all of it." Ellen wanted to believe him. Part of her still loved the man he used to be. Part of her hated the man he had become. Most of her just wanted him to go. "You need to go now, Tom." He nodded, but before he turned away, he said, "I think you always knew. You just didn't want to see it." Ellen closed the door in his face. Closing. Image, suspenseful, bittersweet. That night, Ellen lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain start again. Somewhere out there, Shaw was making moves. Evan and Sarah were probably already feeling the squeeze. Maybe they would back off. Maybe they would escalate. Maybe she had just stepped into a deeper war. She didn't know. All she knew was this: she wasn't innocent. She wasn't blameless, but she wasn't weak either. The world wasn't clean, and neither was she. She could live with that. She would have to. End of part 6. If you want, we can now. Keep going toward a final confrontation between Ellen and Sarah Evan. Big thriller payoff. Do a quiet, ambiguous final chapter where Ellen tries to rebuild, but danger always lurks, psychological, emotional. Or a flash-forward epilogue months, years later, showing what became of Ellen, the kids, Tom, and the enemies in the shadows, bittersweet but satisfying. There was no big explosion. No arrests splashed across the news. Instead, things just shifted. Sarah disappeared. Evan's name stopped popping up in whispered conversations around town. The car that had been parked across from Ellen's house. Some nights vanished. The wrong number calls stopped. For the first time in months, Ellen felt herself unclench. But peace wasn't a simple thing. It was jagged at the edges. It demanded something from you: vigilance, suspicion, patience. Ellen woke every night at 3 a.m., heart-hammering, listening for footsteps that never came. Small changes. She changed the locks again. Sold her wedding ring. The money went into a hidden savings account, just in case she needed to vanish one day. She took self-defense classes at a strip mall gym where nobody cared about her past. She started seeing a therapist. A sharp, kind woman who didn't flinch when Ellen admitted, "I wanted revenge. I still want it." The therapist just nodded. "Of course you do," she said. Tom's fate Tom moved into a cheap apartment across town. He saw the kids on supervised weekends for a while, then graduated to unsupervised afternoons. He was trying, really trying. But trust was a demolished bridge between them. It would take a long time, maybe forever, to rebuild. Some days, Ellen hated how much he still meant to her. Some days, she hated how little. One last threat one evening, Ellen came home to find a small box on her doorstep. No note, no fingerprints. The police could lift. Inside, a dead bird, wings twisted unnaturally, eyes staring. A message, clear as sunlight. You're not safe. She called Rachel, who made a few calls of her own. Rachel's advice was stark. Let it go. Don't poke it. You've hurt them worse than they hurt you. But if you push again, they'll push back. Ellen stood over the sink, staring down at the tiny broken body. For a moment, rage bloomed in her so sharp it made her dizzy. She could call Shaw. She could push harder, demand blood, or she could walk away. Not forgiveness, not weakness. A survival instinct. The decision. She wrapped the bird carefully in a plastic bag, sealed it, and threw it in the trash. Was it the brave thing to do? Maybe not. But it was the smart thing, and she was done bleeding for other people's sins. Closing scene. Open but resonant. Month later, Ellen stood at the edge of a field behind her neighborhood, watching her kids fly a battered old kite against the bright, bruised sky. The wind caught it, pulling it high, and the kids shrieked with laughter. The scars weren't gone. The danger wasn't fully over. Nothing was clean, but life was still moving, and so was she. Ellen turned her face into the wind, closed her eyes, and smiled. Not because she was happy, because she was still here. And sometimes survival was its own quiet kind of victory. End of Part 7. Conclusion. Final notes. Themes achieved. Trust, betrayal, moral ambiguity, lies, survival, bittersweet resilience. Tone. Realistic, emotionally complex, suspenseful without being cartoonishly violent. Ending. Open, but emotionally satisfying. Ellen has no perfect safety, but she has strength, independence, and a future. A fresh coat of pale blue covered the cracks in the siding, but Ellen still knew where they were. Under the surface, hidden but not erased. She sat on the front porch with a mug of lukewarm coffee, the kids playing somewhere in the backyard, the me. Morning was quiet except for the occasional hum of distant lawnmowers. Tom pulled up to the curb in a second-hand sedan. Waved. He looked older. Not broken, not healed. Just human. They had found a rhythm, parallel lives, orbiting each other carefully, like planets that would never collide again. He saw the kids twice a week now. There were still hard conversations, still tension, but also small mercies. Laughter. That didn't feel forced. Moments of grace neither of them fully trusted yet, but accepted anyway. Ellen's new life. Ellen had gone back to work. Not at the upscale design firm she'd once dreamed of, but at a smaller, scrappier company where nobody cared about whispered scandals or ugly divorces. It suited her. She liked starting over. She liked earning her life back, inch by inch, on her own terms. At night, she sometimes still woke to the phantom fear that someone was watching, waiting. But no new threats had come. Sarah was rumored to be living 3 states away, burned through. Most of the hush money, circling some new poor fool, Evan had vanished even deeper underground. Rachel heard whispers now and then, petty crimes, minor frauds, but nothing that would lead him back here. For now, Ellen was safe. Safe enough. Final reflection. She sipped her coffee, listening to the kids' laughter drift over the fence. The sun warmed her face. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single grand moment. Maybe it was thousands of tiny, daily choices. To stay, to rebuild, to risk trust again. She hadn't forgiven Tom. Not entirely. Maybe she never would. But she had forgiven herself. And that was enough for now. Ellen sat in a folding chair at the edge of the soccer field, the autumn wind tangling her hair. The kids were taller now, voices cracking. elbows flying as they chased the ball across the dying grass. She barely recognized them sometimes. Not because they looked different, but because she did. The woman who had once stood trembling with a bat in her hands, waiting for shadows to break down her door, was gone. Not dead, transformed. The ghosts that linger. Sometimes at night, Ellen still thought she heard footsteps on the porch. Sometimes she still flinched when an unknown car slowed too long outside. Her house. The therapist had warned her, healing wasn't forgetting. Healing was learning to live with the memory, so Ellen had learned. She had built a life with stronger walls, but softer rooms. Tom he eventually remarried, a woman from work. Sweet. Safe. Their kids liked her mostly. Ellen didn't feel betrayed. She felt, surprisingly, relieved. Tom had found something he could live with, and so had she. There were occasional awkward conversations at school events, fractured holidays, brief smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes, but no wars. That, too, was a kind of peace. Sarah and Evan rumors surfaced once in a while. Distant. Towns, minor scandals. Sarah's mugshot floated briefly around local news feeds one spring before disappearing again. Petty fraud. 6 months. Probation. Ellen didn't save the article. She didn't need it. Some people never changed. The important thing was that they stayed gone. The last thought as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in bruised oranges and purples. Ellen closed her eyes. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel victorious. She felt present, alive. Every scar mattered. Every failure, every choice she had made, good and bad. It was all hers. That was enough. Finally, enough. The whistle blew on the field. The kids tumbled toward her, breathless and laughing. Ellen stood, wrapped herself tighter in her jacket against the cold, and stepped forward, into whatever came next. Ellen, age 42. Some nights she still dreams of Sarah's voice, soft, venomous. "You think you're better than us?" In the dream, Ellen never answers. She just turns, walks away, her feet crunching over broken glass. Always barefoot. Always bleeding. And always, always smiling. Tom, age 45. He sits in the small backyard of his rented duplex, drinking beer from a plastic cup, listening to his new wife laughing inside. It's a good laugh. Real. But sometimes he wonders if it's him she's laughing at. He wonders if he deserves it. He wonders if anyone ever gets to start clean. Rachel, age 39. Rachel still keeps her gun tucked under the seat of her car. She's left the county newspaper. Too many compromises. Too many battles lost to men in worse suits. Now she runs a podcast, Whistleblower, interviewing people whose lives were shredded by corruption and betrayal. Sometimes she thinks about Ellen, about how narrowly they all escaped. Most people don't escape at all. She never forgets that. Sarah, age unknown. 1,000 miles away, Sarah stirs cream into a diner coffee with a cracked, bitten thumbnail. She's between cons now, between names. There's a young man at the counter. Pretty. Lonely. And she's already spinning the first thread of a story she'll sell him. In another life, maybe she could have been something else. In this one, she survives. That's enough. It's always been enough. Evan, status, unknown. Somewhere. There's a man with Evan's eyes and Evan's smile renting storage units under false names. Somewhere there's a ledger, buried, encrypted, forgotten, still dripping poison through small towns like Ellen's. Some rot never dies. It just mutates. The kids, they don't remember everything. Not clearly. They remember tension, raised voices, car rides in the middle of the night, but mostly they remember their mother standing solid in the doorway, telling them it would be okay. They believe her, they trust her. Maybe that's the only miracle any of them ever really needed. True. Final closure. Now, the story isn't just Ellen's. It's the whole ecosystem around her, frayed and beautiful and broken in different ways. Everyone survives differently. Maya had always known she was different. She didn't fit in high school, not with the cheerleaders or the artists or the normal kids. She was always outside looking in, watching people make the kinds of mistakes she could never seem to avoid. She'd been adopted when she was 2, but it never fully sank in. Not until the letters started, from her birth mother, and then the rest of it unraveled, the truth about Sarah and Evan and their lies, the things they'd done to cover their tracks, the things they'd left behind, the legacy of deceit, the ripple effect. Maya had always known somewhere deep down that her parents weren't the perfect people they had seemed to be. But it wasn't. Until her 20s, after moving across the country, that she realized how tightly she was bound to Ellen's old world. Ellen had been her birth mother's best friend. The first letter Maya found the letter in a yellow envelope, postmarked from a small town she'd never heard of. She was sitting in her apartment, sipping cheap wine from a bottle that had been opened too long, when the weight of it hit her. The words felt heavy, but it was a different kind of heavy than she was used to. This wasn't grief, it was confusion. The letter read, "Maya, I know this will be hard to hear, but your birth mother, Sarah, has been in touch. I'm sure you've heard things, but there's more. You need to know the truth. You deserve to know the truth." Maya dropped the letter, the words like fire to her fingertips. She'd always known the adoption had been kept quiet, but this was something else. She stared at the letter for long moments, heart racing, before reaching for her phone. Few messages back and forth with her adoptive mom, who confirmed some parts of the story. But it wasn't until she went deeper, really deep, that the names of the people involved came into focus. Ellen, her biological mother's best friend. Sarah, Evan. Suddenly, everything she thought she knew about her life seemed far less certain. The meeting. A few weeks later, Maya found herself in the small town of Willow Bend, standing in front of a house she had never seen before. It was so quiet here. Too quiet. She had traced Ellen's address. It wasn't hard. Ellen had made waves once upon a time, and small towns never forget. She had no plan, no words prepared. Just a deep, gnawing need to understand. The door opened after a long, tense moment. Ellen stood there, older now, but still the same woman in many ways. "Hello?" Ellen asked, her voice cautious, measured. "Are you Ellen?" Maya asked, almost in a whisper. Ellen froze. For the first time in years, Ellen felt that same sense of dread she'd thought she'd buried. You're Maya," Ellen said, her breath catching in her throat. "What are you doing? Here?" Maya swallowed, trying to steady herself. I just need answers. From you. The conversation." Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and old books. The kids were at school, so it was just the two of them, facing each other across a kitchen table as thick silence filled the space. "I didn't know about you." "I didn't." "No, Sarah was pregnant when we were together," Ellen said, her voice lower now, quieter. "I didn't know she'd given you up." Maya nodded, the raw edge of something unspoken pressing between them. "I know. You were my mom's best friend. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," Maya said. "I've been told that 100 times by 100 different people." Ellen's eyes darkened, and for a moment Maya saw the years of pain in them. A woman who had been torn apart by someone she loved, only to find herself face to face with a child who should never have been part of this mess. "It's all a tangled web," Ellen admitted. "You don't even know how deep it goes. And I'm sorry. Truly." "I'm not here to blame you," Maya said, her voice steadying. "I'm just trying to figure out why you didn't stop it. Why didn't you tell me anything?" Ellen's eyes softened. She reached out, her hands trembling. "I didn't know what to do. I thought I could protect you from all of it. From her. From him. I was wrong. For the first time, Ellen felt the weight of all the years she had spent trying to silence the ghosts. It was easier then. But now, standing in front of Maya, it was impossible to ignore. Maya sat quietly for a moment before speaking again. I've lived my life trying to understand who I am, who my real parents are, and I've lived my life trying to forget what they did, Ellen whispered. Endings and beginnings in the weeks that followed, Maya and Ellen stayed in touch, cautiously, tentatively. They spoke on the phone, exchanged messages. Slowly, they began to weave something new out of the broken threads. It wasn't a perfect friendship. It wasn't a clean slate, but it was something real. In the end, Maya's journey wasn't about finding a parent to fill the hole Sarah had left. It wasn't even about Ellen fixing her past mistakes. It was about the silence between the years, about learning to live with what came before and what came after, and the way those things would never truly fit together. End of the unseen. New lens. Final reflection. In this extended world, we see how Ellen's past and choices ripple outward. Maya, as a new character, symbolizes the ongoing effects of trauma, secrets, and choices that are often not fully understood until years later. I think what might make sense now is to shift the focus to Rachel, Ellen's friend who has seen the fractures of this world firsthand and has her own story to tell. Rachel's perspective is one of a person who witnessed everything unfold, has her own baggage, and who is now on the outside trying to make sense of it all, and maybe even use her experiences for something larger. Let's dive into Rachel's world, her journey as a woman who's built a platform to speak out about betrayal, secrets, and justice, but also one who is not immune to the moral gray areas herself. Fractures. Rachel's reckoning. Rachel, age 39. Rachel sat at her cluttered desk, the weight of the pending interview pressing down on her. She had built a career, a platform really, around exposing the cracks in other people's worlds. As the creator of the podcast Whistleblower, she'd become the go-to source for exposing small-town scandals, corporate corruption, and broken lives. But behind her smooth, well-rehearsed voice on the podcast, there was a secret she could never quite shake. It wasn't just that she had witnessed Ellen's suffering from the sidelines, or that she had known Sarah intimately as a friend before everything had imploded. It was that Rachel had been complicit in keeping secrets. She could have stopped it all. She could have warned Ellen, even before Sarah had dragged Evan into her life. She could have told the truth even when she was terrified of losing the friendship she so desperately needed. She had buried that guilt in the folds of her podcast episodes, distracting herself with the stories of others' ruin. But now, as she prepared for the interview with a whistleblower from a corrupt corporate firm, Rachel couldn't shake the thought that maybe she wasn't just reporting on the betrayals of others, she had participated in one of her own. The interview that changed everything. The interview was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. By 9:05, the whistleblower was nowhere to be seen. Rachel looked over the notes again, her fingers tracing the details. The man was supposed to be Ben McAllister, a former accountant at a tech company that had been using shady accounting methods to inflate their stock prices. But Ben wasn't answering his phone. Rachel checked her messages. Nothing. Her mind kept drifting back to Ellen. She didn't know if she could trust herself to be objective anymore. Flashback. The turning point. The phone call had come at 3 a.m. She had known something was off when Ellen's voice trembled through the receiver. "I don't know what to do," Ellen had whispered, her words jagged. They're not just playing games anymore." It had been the night before the final confrontation with Sarah. The night before, everything had come crashing down, and Rachel had done nothing. She had stayed quiet, hidden behind the comforting lie that she wasn't involved. that she had no role in what was happening between Ellen, Sarah, and Evan. She had lied to herself, but not anymore. The reckoning, Rachel's phone buzzed again, pulling her back from the past. Ben McAllister. Finally, she took a deep breath, ready to dive into another scandal, to peel apart the lives of corporate greed. But as she dialed his number, she realized that maybe the story she'd been running from wasn't just about what happened in other people's lives. It was about her. It was about her choices, her silence. Ben answered, his voice tentative but sharp. "Hello?" Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself to focus on the interview. She asked the first question, her voice steady, but her mind kept racing back to Ellen, to the feeling that had haunted her for years. The deep sense that she was still running away from something she needed to confront. The unraveling days passed. Interviews continued. Stories poured in from all over the country for her podcast. Corruption, deceit, betrayal, and yet Rachel's own story remained unsaid. She couldn't hide from it forever. The more she shared other people's trauma, the more she realized she hadn't dealt with her own. The silence between her and Ellen, the unspoken truth that Ellen would never fully forgive her for not speaking up, weighed on her. But Rachel had a way of talking about truth without ever quite facing it. She had gotten good at it, good at hiding, until the night of the gala, the charity event that brought together some of the town's wealthiest figures. Rachel was seated across from Ellen at the dinner table, a silent truce hanging in the air between them. Ellen's new life was working. She had moved on, redefined herself. And yet Rachel knew that Ellen carried the scars, just like her. "Are we ever really done with it?" Rachel asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "The things we try to bury?" Ellen's eyes flickered. She looked older in the soft lighting, but there was something there, strength, acceptance. "No," Ellen said softly. "We're never really done with it. We just get better at living with it." The moment of truth. Rachel's podcast had gained a lot of traction, but now it was more than just a career. It was a mission. She had just begun a new series on betrayal in the workplace when Ellen called. Rachel wasn't surprised to hear from her, but she was surprised by what Ellen said. "I'm doing a thing. A public thing. I want to tell my side of the story. With you." Rachel froze. The air felt thick. "Are you sure?" Rachel asked, already knowing the answer. "You don't have to. I don't want to push you into something you're not ready for. I need to. For me. For us." Rachel's heart skipped. This wasn't about the podcast. It wasn't about the lies they'd told. This was about truth, healing. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where both of them could stop running. End of Rachel's reckoning. Key takeaways. Rachel's character, arc. We see Rachel struggle with her own guilt and complicity in the past. Her podcast is a way of dealing with others' betrayals, but she finally has to confront her own. Ellen and Rachel's unfinished story. The possibility of reconciliation or resolution between Ellen and Rachel is opened up, with Ellen taking control of her own narrative. Themes of silence and truth. Rachel's story expands the theme of how we live with our secrets and how confronting them can lead to both personal and public healing. It was 3 a.m. when Rachel finally put her podcast's latest episode to bed. She'd spent the last few hours tweaking the script, the narrative that would expose another corporate scandal, but something felt off. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she scrolled through the pages of the script again, but the words felt hollow. Another betrayal, another story of greed. She used to feel a rush, the adrenaline of breaking a story wide open, the thrill of revealing corruption that others had kept hidden. But lately, it didn't feel like justice anymore. It felt like a kind of self-punishment. Rachel rubbed her eyes, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her like a physical burden. She hadn't been sleeping well for months. She couldn't tell if it was the constant work or the gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach that wouldn't go away. She thought about Ellen, the truth she'd been running from for so long. In the past, Rachel had justified her silence. She'd told herself that there was nothing she could have done, that it was Ellen's fight, and she couldn't interfere without destroying everything. But now, with each episode of Whistleblower that she recorded, each story of betrayal that she uncovered, it became harder to convince herself that her silence hadn't compounded the hurt. Her phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Ellen. It had been 2 weeks since their last conversation. Rachel had hesitated, unsure of whether Ellen was truly ready to confront her past, or if this was just another attempt to patch up an old wound. But something in Rachel's chest tightened when she saw the name. She answered. Hey. Rachel. Ellen's voice was soft, almost cautious. I've been thinking about what you said, about telling my side of the story, and I've decided that I want to do it. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment Ellen had been building up to. But Rachel wasn't prepared for the emotion that surged within her. Something deep and unspoken, something that threatened to break the facade Rachel had carefully built. Ellen continued, I need you to help me tell it. I need you to be there, not just as a reporter, as a friend. Rachel felt a sharp pang in her chest, and for a moment she couldn't speak. A friend. Had she ever been a real one? Or had she just been a witness and a watching from the sidelines? As everything fell apart? I'll do it, Rachel finally said, her voice steady but her mind reeling. We'll tell your story the way it deserves to be told. There was a long pause before Ellen spoke again, her voice barely audible. Thank you. The podcast episode over the next week, Rachel found herself torn between the meticulous nature of her work and the rawness of what she was about to help Ellen share with the world. The next Whistleblower episode was scheduled to release in just a few days, but this was different. Rachel had helped tell stories of corporate corruption, of people who had betrayed their communities for money. But Ellen's story, Sarah's, betrayal, the broken trust between them, and Rachel's role in it was more complex. It wasn't about power or profit, it was about human connection, and the consequences that come when that connection is shattered. Ellen had agreed to sit down and record the interview in a way that would allow her to speak her truth without feeling pressured to reveal all, just to speak honestly. In her own time, Rachel arranged for a quiet, isolated room in the local library. She didn't want the distractions of the outside world, didn't want anyone to overhear what they were about to say. When they sat down across from each other, the weight of the silence was palpable. Ellen's eyes were red, and the lines on her face seemed deeper than the last time Rachel had seen her. Time had worn away at her in a way that Rachel couldn't ignore. I don't know if I'll ever truly forgive myself for what happened, Ellen began, for letting Sarah get away with what she did, for not seeing it sooner, and for not standing up sooner for you, for my family. Rachel's throat tightened. She wasn't sure she could listen to Ellen's pain without breaking, but she held it together, nodding for her to continue. And I know you were there. I know you tried to help me. But I didn't know how to let you in. I didn't know how to trust you, Rachel. Even though I wanted to. Even though I needed you. Ellen's voice wavered. I think that's what hurt the most. That I had to carry that alone. Rachel's eyes welled up, but she didn't let the tears fall. I'm sorry, was all she managed to say. No, Ellen said, shaking her head. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have told you everything. I should have trusted you. Rachel's heart ached as she listened. She thought she was doing the right thing by staying silent, by stepping back, by letting Ellen handle it. But she had been wrong. She had been wrong. Ellen took a deep breath before continuing. But you know, I think that's the hardest part about all of this. How much of it we never say. The things we keep hidden because we're afraid of what'll happen if we let it all out. Rachel reached out and placed a hand on Ellen's. We're doing it now, she said softly. We're finally doing it. The episode was released a week later. Ellen's story was raw, unfiltered, and honest. The community response was mixed. Some rallied behind Ellen, praising her for speaking her truth. Others, including a few distant relatives, found it hard to swallow, accusing her of airing dirty laundry that should have stayed buried. But Rachel knew that this was the point. There was no easy way to heal from what had happened. There was only the difficult, messy path of living with the truth, of speaking it, no matter how painful. Rachel's own podcast gained a new level of attention. People were starting to question what it meant to expose secrets, to speak up when things went wrong. Rachel was no longer just a reporter. She was part of the story. Her own story, one she had to confront if she was going to continue. As she sat back in her office late one night, the episode stats ticking upward, Rachel finally felt a sense of catharsis. The guilt that had haunted her for so long didn't completely fade. But now, at least, she had the beginning of a way forward. She had helped Ellen tell her story. She had faced her own role in the past, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. End of Rachel's awakening. Reflection. This chapter delves into Rachel's own reckoning. She's no longer just an outsider reporting on other people's betrayals. She's a part of the story, forced to reckon with the guilt of her own silence and the toll it took on her relationships. The release of Ellen's story serves as both a cathartic public healing and a private one as Rachel faces the truth about her own role in the past. Maya sat in the quiet of her room, her fingers scrolling idly through her phone. The familiar ache in her chest returned as her thumb stopped over a familiar post. It was from the Whistleblower podcast. The headline read, "Breaking the Silence. Ellen's truth and the betrayal that shattered a family." Maya swallowed, reading the first few lines before her eyes blurred with unshed tears. Her mother had spoken. Ellen had finally told the world about the mess that had torn apart their family. Her betrayal of Rachel, the secret she'd kept for years, and the painful truths about Sarah. Maya wasn't surprised. She knew what had happened. But there was something different about hearing her mother's pain laid bare for the world to hear. It felt like she was standing on the outside, looking in at something she couldn't quite touch or fix. She put the phone down, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The fracture wasn't just between Ellen and Rachel anymore. It was between all of them. Flashback. The days before the truth came out, it had been a couple of weeks since the big fallout, and Maya had spent most of her time trying to make sense of everything. She'd been angry at Sarah for the secrets she'd kept from her, for dragging Evan into their world of lies, but she also didn't know how to feel about her mother. Ellen's constant quiet, the way she'd withdrawn from Maya after the fight with Sarah, it all felt like something was missing. A part of her mother had closed off, and Maya had been left in the middle, suspended in the awkward space between them. But it wasn't just her mother who was at the center of her thoughts. It was Rachel, too. The podcast. It had become a kind of lifeline for Rachel, and maybe, just maybe, it was a way for Maya to understand why her mother had done what she did, why she had betrayed Rachel, why she had kept things secret for so long. One night, as she lay in bed, Maya had overheard her mother talking to Rachel on the phone. She couldn't hear every word, but she heard the tremble in her mother's voice. The apology, the regret. I'm sorry, Rachel. I should have trusted you. I should have told you. You deserved more than this silence. Maya had pressed her ear against the door, her heart heavy with confusion. She had always thought of her mother as strong, unshakable, but now she saw that there were cracks, deep ones. The truth, it seemed, was a force too powerful to ignore. The interview with Ellen. The day after the podcast episode aired, Maya came home from school to find Ellen sitting on the couch, staring at the screen. The whistleblower episode was on repeat, the sounds of Ellen's voice filling the living room. Maya stood in the doorway, unsure of how to proceed. "Mom," Maya said quietly, "are you okay?" Ellen turned to look at her daughter, her face drawn and tired. "I didn't want you to hear it this way," she said, her voice low. "But it's out now." Maya nodded slowly. She had already heard the episode. The details were seared into her memory. The pain in her mother's voice, the way she admitted to everything, the betrayal, the silence. "I don't know what to say," Maya whispered. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me before? Why didn't you tell anyone?" Ellen's gaze dropped, and for a moment she seemed lost. She had always tried to protect Maya from the truth, but in doing so, she had pushed her daughter away. "I thought I was protecting you," Ellen said, her voice breaking. "I thought if I kept it all hidden, kept it in the dark, you wouldn't have to carry the burden with me." Maya shook her head, her chest tight. "But I already knew something was wrong. You think I didn't feel the tension? The way you've been so distant?" Her voice wavered, and she took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. "I'm not a kid anymore, Mom. I can handle the truth. What I couldn't handle was you pretending everything was okay." Ellen's eyes welled up. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I see now that I have." Maya felt her heart twist. Part of her wanted to forgive her mother, to understand why Ellen had made the choices she did, but another part of her was still angry. Angry at the years of lies, the years of silence. "I'm not sure I can just forget this, Mom," Maya said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ellen nodded, her eyes filled with guilt. "I wouldn't ask you to." The confrontation with Sarah Maya had always looked up to Sarah. Her cousin was the one who had been the fun, rebellious force in her life. But after everything that had happened, Maya couldn't reconcile the image of Sarah she had, once held in her heart with the betrayal that had splintered their family. When Sarah showed up at Maya's door a week later, Maya was almost afraid to face her. "I know you're mad at me," Sarah said quietly, standing in the doorway. "I know I messed everything up, but I'm sorry, Maya. I never meant to hurt anyone." Maya crossed her arms, trying to keep her emotions in check. "You didn't just hurt people, Sarah. You tore apart everything. You lied to us. You made it all worse." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Maya saw a hint of vulnerability. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice cracking. "But I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." Maya took a deep breath, her heart torn between her loyalty to Sarah and her growing sense of justice for her mother. "Don't know if I can ever trust you again," Maya said finally. "But I want to believe that you didn't mean for things to get this bad." Sarah nodded, tears slipping down her face. "I never meant for any of it to happen. I was afraid of losing you all." The two of them stood there for a moment, in the quiet of the room, the weight of all the unspoken words between them. Maya's decision. In the days that followed, Maya spent more time reflecting on everything. On Ellen's revelations, Sarah's apologies, and her own role in this fractured family. She realized that healing wouldn't happen overnight. She would have to learn to live with the ambiguity of it all. The truth was messy, and forgiveness wasn't always a clear-cut path. But one thing was certain. Maya had to choose for herself. Who did she want to be in this story? She decided to sit down with Ellen one last time, to speak from the heart, Can't promise that everything's going to be okay, Maya said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. But I think we can try to move forward. Together. We have to. Or we'll keep breaking apart. Ellen's eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was a sense of hope, the first spark of reconciliation. I'll take that. Maya, Ellen whispered. That's all I can ask for. End of Maya's reckoning. Key takeaways. Maya's inner conflict. Maya grapples with her growing understanding of the complexity of human relationships. She has to navigate between her love for her mother, her disappointment with Sarah, and her desire for justice. The power of truth. Ellen's decision to speak out changes the dynamic within the family. Maya is forced to confront not only the truth of the past, but her own feelings about betrayal and loyalty. The road to reconciliation. The chapter explores the idea that healing is not an easy or quick process. Maya's decision to try and move forward is a step toward reconciliation, but the future remains uncertain. Sarah sat in the small, dimly lit apartment she'd moved into a few months ago. The walls, bare except for a few mismatched paintings, echoed her solitude. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the otherwise quiet space. Her phone buzzed on the table, but she didn't reach for it. She knew who it was, her mother, Ellen. Sarah had been avoiding her, not because she didn't want to fix things, but because she didn't know where to start. The fallout from her betrayal had rippled through the family, and she felt like a pariah. After hearing the podcast, after hearing Ellen's raw, painful truth, Sarah couldn't stop replaying the words in her head. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I have hurt you. Her mother had always been the strong one, the one who kept things together, the one who told her everything would be okay. And now, it was Sarah who had shattered that illusion. She had stolen the one thing Ellen needed most, trust. But it wasn't just Ellen she had wronged. It was Maya, too. And she had no idea how to apologize for the years of lies, for the way she had manipulated people she loved. Sarah closed her eyes, the guilt suffocating her. She had acted out of fear, desperation, and a need for control that had ultimately destroyed everything. Flashback. The moment. Sarah knew she was crossing a line. The night she and Rachel had confronted Ellen still haunted Sarah. She had been so angry, so hurt, and in that anger she had said things she didn't mean. She had justified it, told herself it was the only way to regain control, to feel like she wasn't drowning in a sea of secrets. But now, sitting in the silence of her apartment, the truth was undeniable. She had chosen to betray every person. Who had ever trusted her? Why didn't you just listen? The voice of reason from a part of her that still cared felt like a punch to the gut. She had chosen to expose Rachel's darkest secrets, to threaten Ellen with the possibility of making everything public, because that was what Sarah wanted in the moment, to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. But she never stopped to think about the destruction she was causing in the process. Sarah's encounter with Maya had texted her earlier in the week, asking if they could meet. It was clear Maya was struggling, torn between forgiveness and the need for justice. But Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to face her cousin, who had once been like a sister. When Maya showed up at the coffee shop, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Maya had changed. She wasn't the little girl Sarah remembered, the one who had always looked up to her, the one who followed her lead no matter what. Now Maya was quiet, guarded, her face unreadable. Sarah hesitated for a moment before she stood up to greet her. Maya. Maya didn't immediately respond. She just nodded, her eyes cold. Sarah. There was an awkward silence as they both sat down, and Sarah didn't know how to start. What could she say that would make a difference? What words could undo what she had done? I'm sorry, Sarah finally said, the words coming out raw and unrefined. I never meant to hurt you, Maya. I didn't think about how much damage I was doing. I just wanted to fix things, and I got so lost in it that Maya held up her hand, stopping Sarah mid-sentence. I don't need you to explain, Sarah, she said softly. I need you to own it, to admit that you knew exactly what you were doing and that you didn't care about anyone else. Sarah flinched, the sharpness of Maya's words cutting through her like a blade. Maya, please. I was scared. I thought I had to fix everything, and I didn't know how to do that without lying, without betraying people who loved you. Maya interrupted, her voice trembling with the weight of emotion. You didn't just hurt Mom and Rachel. You hurt me too, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Sarah's chest tightened and the weight of her actions pressed down on her like a physical force. What had she done? I'm so sorry, Sarah whispered. I know that doesn't make it right, but I'm trying. I'm trying to figure out how to fix it, how to make things better. Maya shook her head, her eyes filled with a sadness that Sarah couldn't ignore. I don't know if you can fix it, Sarah. I don't know if anything will ever be the same. But I need time to figure out what I can even feel about you anymore. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. She couldn't argue with that. The damage had been done. Sarah's call to Ellen later that night, after leaving the coffee shop, Sarah finally found the courage to call Ellen. The thought of hearing her mother's voice again sent a rush of fear through her, but she knew she couldn't run anymore. If there was any hope for redemption, it had to start with this. The phone rang once, twice, and then Ellen's voice came through. Sarah? I'm sorry, Mom, Sarah said, her voice shaky. I've been avoiding you, and I shouldn't have. I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I didn't realize how deep it went, but I see it now. I see the way I've broken everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Ellen responded. Sarah, it's not about just saying sorry. You have to show me that you understand what you've done. You have to prove to me that you're ready to take responsibility for your actions. I will, Sarah promised, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how yet, but I'll try. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'll try. Ellen sighed, her voice softening. I don't know if I can forgive you yet either, but maybe we can start by talking, by understanding each other. Sarah's final decision? The next few weeks were a blur of trying to piece together the fragments of her life. Sarah knew that the road ahead was long and uncertain, but she was ready to start trying. The first step was simple. Apologize and show up, not just for Ellen and Rachel, but for herself. As she sat alone in her apartment one evening, Sarah reflected on everything that had led her here. She had always been afraid of losing control, of being seen as weak. But now she understood that the strength wasn't in keeping secrets or manipulating situations. The strength was in facing the truth no matter how painful. She was ready to rebuild, not just her relationship with her family, but her own sense of self-worth. The person she wanted to be was someone who could be honest, someone who could make amends for her mistakes. End of Sarah's reckoning. Rachel stood by the window of her small apartment, her eyes scanning the city below. The lights from the street lamps cast a soft glow, but it didn't lift the heaviness that sat on her chest. The podcast had aired days ago, and still, she couldn't shake the sense of betrayal that clung to her like a second skin. Her mother, Ellen, had finally confessed. Finally. After years of silence, of pretense, Ellen had admitted to the affair with Sarah, the lies, the years of secrets. Rachel had known for a while now that something was wrong, but hearing Ellen's voice tremble with raw emotion, confessing everything, it felt like being stabbed in the gut. How could Ellen have kept this from her? How could Sarah, her own cousin, who had been her closest friend for years, the person she had trusted more than anyone, but the podcast wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a different kind of pain, the kind that had nothing to do with the public fallout, but everything to do with what was left unsaid between Rachel and Ellen. Rachel's phone buzzed, breaking her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Maya. "Can we talk? I know things are complicated, but I need to say something. Let me know." Rachel hesitated for a moment. She hadn't seen Maya since the fallout, and honestly, she didn't know if she was ready to face her. Maya had always been caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to her mother and her cousin. But something told Rachel that this message wasn't about the past. It was about the future. Rachel typed a quick reply. "I'm free tomorrow. Let's talk." She needed answers. She needed clarity. Flashback. The night Ellen's secret was revealed. The night it all fell apart felt like a blur to Rachel. One moment, everything seemed fine. They were having dinner at her mother's house, and for a moment, it was almost like old times. But then Ellen had dropped the bombshell, and everything unraveled. Rachel had always prided herself on being the rock in the family, the one who kept things together. But the moment Ellen admitted to everything, the affair with Sarah, the lies, the guilt, Rachel felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath her. The betrayal hadn't just been about Sarah. It had been about Ellen's silence, the years of pretending. Rachel had never once questioned her mother's integrity. Now, she didn't know if she could ever trust her again. "You knew," Rachel had whispered, barely able to keep her voice steady as she stared at Ellen. "And you never said anything." Ellen had tried to explain, but Rachel couldn't hear her. The hurt, the disbelief had been overwhelming. It wasn't just the affair, it was the years of complicity, the secrecy, the fact that Ellen had chosen to protect herself and Sarah at the expense of Rachel's trust. "I thought I was protecting you," Ellen had said, her voice breaking. Rachel didn't respond. There were no words to capture the devastation she felt. Rachel's confrontation with Ellen. The next day, Rachel stood outside Ellen's apartment, her hand resting on the doorbell. She hadn't decided what she was going to say, but she knew she needed to see her mother face to face. When Ellen opened the door, her eyes were red from crying. She stepped aside silently, letting Rachel in. The silence between them was heavy, almost suffocating. "I listened to the podcast," Rachel said, her voice flat. "I heard everything." Ellen nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but I had to say it, Rachel. I had to be honest." Rachel laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Honesty? You think that's what this is about? After years of lying to me, of keeping things from me, you think a podcast is enough?" "I never wanted to hurt you," Ellen said, her voice trembling. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I was protecting you from the pain, from the truth." Rachel stepped back, holding up a hand to stop her. "You weren't protecting me, Mom. You were protecting yourself. You were hiding your mistakes, your shame. And I had to live with that." Ellen's face crumpled, and for a moment Rachel thought she might break down too. But she held herself steady. "I know I've failed you," Ellen said softly. "But I'm asking you please to let me make it right. I've lost so much already. I don't want to lose you too." Rachel felt a pang of sorrow deep inside her, but it wasn't enough to override the anger and betrayal. "I don't know how to forgive you, Mom," she said. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Ellen collapsed onto the couch, her face in her hands. "I don't expect forgiveness right away," she whispered. "I know I've destroyed that trust, but I'm here, Rachel. Whenever you're ready." Rachel nodded, her throat tight. Whenever she was ready. The truth was, she didn't know if she'd ever be ready. Rachel's journey to forgiveness days passed, and Rachel found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She wanted to be angry, wanted to keep her distance, but part of her was still clinging to the hope that healing was possible. She couldn't just shut her mother out completely. She had to decide what kind of relationship she wanted. With Ellen, with Sarah, with herself. But the questions kept swirling. Could she forgive her mother? Could she forgive the lies, the betrayal? Could she reconcile with Sarah, who had been just as guilty in her own way? And what about Maya? Could she find it in her heart to trust her again after everything that had happened? Rachel and Sarah. The difficult conversation. The next day, Rachel received a message from Sarah. It had been a while since they'd spoken, and Rachel wasn't sure she was ready for a conversation with her cousin. But something inside her urged her to take this step. They met in a small cafe, the tension palpable from the moment Sarah sat down. Her eyes were red, and there was a deep sadness in her face that Rachel hadn't expected to see. "I'm sorry," Sarah said immediately, her voice cracking. "I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I had to do something drastic to fix everything, but I made everything worse. I don't expect you to forgive me, Rachel, but I need you to know that I'm sorry for everything, for hurting you, for hurting Mom, for hurting Maya." Rachel stared at her, the anger still simmering inside her. But there was also something else, something that made her hesitate, vulnerability, genuine regret. "I don't know what to say, Sarah," Rachel replied. "You and Mom, you both betrayed me in ways I never thought possible, but I'm trying to figure out if I can still see you as family, if I can ever trust you again." Sarah nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't know if you'll ever trust me again, but I'm not giving up on us. I'll prove to you that I can be the person you need me to be. I'll earn your trust back." Rachel didn't respond immediately, but something inside her softened. She wasn't ready to forgive Sarah yet, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them. Rachel's decision. As Rachel walked home that evening, the city lights flickering around her, she felt a sense of clarity. There were no easy answers. There were no guarantees. But what she did know was this: forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about healing, about finding peace, even if it meant navigating the messy, painful truths. She wasn't ready to fully trust Ellen again. She wasn't sure if she ever would. But maybe they could rebuild, piece by piece. Maybe forgiveness could be a step-by-step journey, not an immediate fix. For now, she would take it one day at a time. End of Rachel's reckoning. Key takeaways. Rachel's emotional journey. Rachel grapples with trust, betrayal, and the possibility of forgiveness. She is deeply wounded, but she is beginning to find her way toward healing. The complexity of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a clear-cut path. Rachel's decision about how to move forward will take time, and there is no guarantee that she will ever fully trust again.